Welcome to Debugging Dan, where I share weekly my journey balancing life, a full-time job, and side projects. I'm Dan, your host. Let's dive in. This is episode 6 already of the Debugging Dan podcast, and today I want to do something different. I want to do a bit of a reflection on the previous episode. So I've recorded more than 5 episodes already, but I published 5 until now. Some didn't really click with me in terms of the topic or how I talked in the episode. So some recordings didn't, and I might republish them at a later point. I have several main to reflect on, like the method of recording that I used, how I did the editing, and also the content for the podcast. So that's what I want to focus on. I did mention it in some of the episodes, but how I recorded the podcast was using my phone from the car in my commute to work. I drive for like 20 minutes to work in my commute. I figured I didn't have time to do talking, so I recorded from car. And I noticed 2 things listening back to the recordings. There are background noises like the blinker, other cars, stuff happens like the right of way, and I make a note on that. But what I did find is I need to do a lot of editing because of those noises, and also when listening to it, there are a lot of silence points and ums and ahs. That's because you can hear that it doesn't have my full focus. I'm driving the car, which is the highest speed because that is related to safety, and I also record the podcast. You can hear that my focus is divided there, which isn't necessarily great for the content quality. During editing, I remove a lot of ums and ahs and a lot of silence, but that does mean a lot more work. And also, when I listen or when I focus on the speech, I use some stop words. Those are different per episode. So sometimes I use a lot of so, and then the next sentence starts with so, and then, which is, at least I find, annoying. And it's also something that I think will be better when I record it fully focused on the recording itself, as I'm doing now. And also I use my earbuds to record, and there's also sometimes an annoying swallowing sound because they're close to my ears and throat, and then you hear swallowing. I edit it out, like with stop words or with the ums and ahs. It does require more editing, and preferably I like to do things in one take, just chop off the beginning, chop off the end, and that's it. And then it forces me to listen more concentrated to the podcast itself when I'm editing, and that takes more time. So talking about editing, the quality of the recording with these earbuds is not that great, but I use Adobe podcast announcing, and that improves the audio quality a lot. So that's something that really helps. And the episodes are relatively short, so they're like 10, 15 minutes. But editing still takes some time. And I don't have a lot of time to do editing since I'm working a full-time job. I have a family, I have hobbies, and I got stuff to do like everybody else. So I'd like to streamline that as most efficient as possible. And the first episodes I really found it annoying, but I recently found my wife's Stream Deck, which she bought for controlling home automation. And I programmed it with some shortcuts from Audacity, and that really improved the process. So it's a lot more simple to just go back while listening, go back a few seconds, start selection, end selection with the press of a button, just listen back. Oh, if I delete that, what does it sound like? So that's really helpful, and it also improves the process. It makes it a lot more enjoyable for me, which is also important. And I feel that while listening to the podcast, I also found that the recordings itself could be a little bit more shorter and more to the point. And I think that also goes back to when I'm telling it that I was driving the car. So that makes it a little bit more difficult to remember what I was saying and focus on not repeating myself. And hopefully when I record this outside of the car, I'm going to do all upcoming recordings. I'm not going to do that in the car anymore. I'm going to do those at home. I'm just going to find 5 to 10 minutes to set up and record. I can fit that in a time schedule, and it will make editing and publishing the podcast a lot more efficient, and it should improve the quality. And the third talking point I wanted to talk about was Now, these are the generic topics that I mostly talk about. So completing a project, doing planning. And I'm also thinking about kind of like this episode to do more weekly or bi-weekly project updates or live updates on what I'm working on, kind of share that and share the good things that I think on, things that I find awesome doing it, things I've learned. So that's also something that I want to add more, because I believe that at some point, the more generic topics, something will also be out, and I won't have that much to talk about anymore. And since it's a weekly podcast, we need to have something to talk about that by interchanging the generic topics with the live updates would be a lot better in terms of content, more, and hopefully get feedback from other people that are listening on how things are doing. And it might allow me to also share the content or snippets of the content a bit more on other social platforms beside the podcast. Thinking about that, one thing I've been also thinking about is to start doing the podcast recording with video. I need to figure out a few things. So my laptop on which I'm doing the recording now doesn't have a very good webcam, and I don't really want to invest a lot of money yet into a super fancy HD 4K camera. So I'm looking to see if I can use my smartphone camera, a cheap ring light that might improve the lighting a little bit. I'm looking into buying a green screen that I can set up behind me, because we don't have a lot of free room or boxes here, and I don't want to have to clean out every time I have to do it. And I do want to have a more relaxed background while doing the recording. So I figured if I'm doing a green screen, I can set it up quickly, remove it when I'm done, and I can replace the green stuff with a more Zen background, something AI generated. I can vary it per episode if I'd like. So that's also what I'm looking for. It also depends on how the audio quality is while I'm recording this, but I might also be looking into buying a better microphone, since I'm now doing it stably and not from the car. I might also need to check what the quality is for that one, or look into a more precisional microphone that I can use to create better recordings, and that would also reduce the recording time. In terms of podcast itself, I enjoy doing it. The editing is not my favorite part, but I like thinking about topics. I've set up a part of automation, the editing part. I do like to talk about things that I'm busy with. It's like I can pour my energy and soul into it and just talk things out. So it's also kind of therapeutic for myself. And hopefully, and probably when I talk about more in details about the projects that I'm working on, it would be even more therapeutic. I enjoy doing it. I hope to get more, or that people start giving feedback. So YouTube, I'm still working on Apple Podcasts. I submitted it on June 16th, and I'm still waiting for it to be released or approved on Apple Podcasts. Last Sunday, I filled in a contact form saying, hey, what's the holdup? Why is it still in draft and it can't post it yet? So I'm still waiting on that, and hopefully when it also gets on the iTunes platform where it is, which is one of the biggest ones, hopefully I'll be able to get some ratings or comments, and hopefully that feedback I will be able to process that again into the recordings and work with that. So episode 6, my reflection on the podcast. I really enjoy doing it, and I hope that you enjoy listening, and speak to you on the next one. Thanks for tuning in to Debugging Dan. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and leave a review. Stay curious, and see you next week.